More than 1,000 years ago, somewhere in the north, a hand closed around an iron tool and pressed its edge against stone. The first blow rang out, then another. A line appeared where there had been none. The carver could not know that his world would one day be flattened into horned helmets, burning monasteries, and symbols sold as ancient magic. He knew only something more immediate and more frightening. A human name could vanish. So he gave that name a body. Stroke by stroke, sound became shape, memory entered stone, and a voice learned how to outlive the mouth that had spoken it. The ships are gone. The timber halls have folded into the earth. Old Norse has been silent as a living language for centuries. Yet the runes remain, and through them, the Viking world returns not as legend, but as something literate, connected, spiritual, practical, political, and unmistakably human. But the first truth they reveal is also the first myth they destroy. The Vikings did not invent runes. When Scandinavian raiders first appeared along the coasts of Western Europe in the late 8th century, runic writing was already ancient to them. Its earliest known forms reach back to the first centuries of the Common Era, long before the first famous longship crossed the North Sea. At the Svingerud gravefield in Norway, fragments discovered by archaeologists have been dated to the early Roman Iron Age. They may preserve the oldest securely datable runic writing on stone yet found. To a Viking Age carver, those first surviving marks would already have belonged to a remote past, as distant, perhaps, as a Roman inscription feels beneath our fingers today. That earliest system is known to modern scholars as the Elder Futhark, named for its first 6 sounds: f, u, th, a, k. It contained 24 characters and spread through parts of the Germanic-speaking world. Exactly where it emerged remains uncertain. Some of its letter forms suggest contact with alphabets used farther south in the Roman world, but the path of that influence is still debated. There was probably no lone inventor and no single night of revelation. Like most writing systems, the runes seem to have taken shape through contact, imitation, adaptation, and repeated experiment. Ordinary human borrowing transformed into something new. And despite the mystery later generations wrapped around them, runes were not a separate secret tongue. They were letters used to write languages people actually spoke. Their angular forms were practical. Straight strokes could be cut into wood, bone, antler, metal, and stone without vanishing into the grain or splintering into curves. A few marks could identify an owner, preserve a name, label an object, record a prayer, or carry a message. But what we know depends on what survived. Stone endured, wood decayed, bone fractured, metal was melted down, reshaped, and used again. The evidence that reaches us is therefore not a complete portrait of runic culture. It is a portrait edited by soil, fire, water, reuse, and chance. That invisible editing has changed the story. A monument beside a road can remain upright for 1,000 years. A joke cut into a wooden stick may disappear in a single wet season. Memorials survive. Shopping lists, love notes, practice lines, and insults usually do not. As a result, the Viking world can appear more ceremonial, more aristocratic, and more mysterious than it actually was. The silence of ordinary objects has helped create the legend. Then, near the beginning of the Viking Age, the alphabet itself changed in a way that seems almost backward. The Elder Futhark had 24 runes. The Younger Futhark, used throughout Viking Age Scandinavia, had only 16. The spoken language was developing new sound distinctions, yet the writing system was becoming smaller. The answer was not simplicity, but compression. One rune could now represent several related sounds. A single sign might do the work a modern reader expects from both K and G, or T and D, or I and E. The missing information had to be recovered from context. This was not careless spelling. It was a system that demanded participation. Readers recognized patterns, anticipated words, and used their knowledge of the language to resolve ambiguity, much as an English speaker accepts that the same letter behaves differently in cat, city, and chorus. Viking Age spelling did not merely transmit a word. It asked the reader to complete it. The Younger Futhark also appeared in more than one visual form. Long branch runes preserved fuller, more elaborate shapes. Short twig runes reduced many of those forms to faster, leaner strokes. Scholars still debate exactly how these styles spread through different regions and periods, and the carvers themselves showed little respect for the neat categories created centuries later. They mixed forms, shortened lines, developed local habits, copied older models, and sometimes made simple mistakes. Runic writing was never a frozen sacred code. It was a living technology, altered every day by the hands that used it. That raises one of the most difficult questions in Viking history. How many people could actually read? Some carvers were clearly trained specialists. In 11th century Sweden, masters such as Opir and Visata developed styles so distinctive that their work can be recognized from monument to monument. They planned the path of an inscription, balanced words against ornament, fitted names into winding bands, and sometimes signed the finished stone almost as artists sign a painting. Yet other texts are rougher, shorter, and far more casual. Ownership marks, names, jokes, practice lines, fragments scratched by someone still learning how a rune should sit beneath the knife. Literacy, then, probably existed in layers. One person may have recognized a familiar name. Another could carve a short statement. A smaller group could compose, design, and execute a great public monument. The ability to write was not simply present or absent. It stretched across a spectrum, and those who mastered it most completely gained unusual power. They did not merely preserve memory. They helped decide the language in which memory would survive. The most visible evidence still standing comes from runestones. Around 2,500 have been found in Sweden, with roughly 1,300 in Uppland alone. Denmark preserves hundreds of Viking Age examples, while further inscriptions appear across Norway and throughout the wider Norse world. Popular culture often treats these stones as pages torn from a book of spells. Most are nothing of the kind. Most are memorials. At first, their formulas can sound almost repetitive. One person raised a stone in memory of another. A wife remembered her husband. Parents remembered a son. Brothers named a brother who died far from home. A daughter preserved the name of her mother. Yet the repetition is precisely what gives the stones their force. Each monument performs the same small rebellion against oblivion. This person lived. This person belonged to us. This person will not disappear without resistance. But grief was only one layer. The stones also mapped power, where inheritance, reputation, and family alliance shaped nearly every future. Naming the dead could also identify the living. A single monument might announce lineage, property, loyalty, wealth, and authority, while appearing to speak only of loss. It could contain sincere mourning, and at the same time, display the resources required to hire a master carver. In the Viking world, memory and status were not competing motives. They were cut into the same surface. And these stones were rarely hidden away. Many stood where people moved, beside roads, river crossings, bridges, farms, boundaries, assembly places, and routes between settlements. Their carvings were often painted. Serpents, crosses, animals, and interlacing bands of text may once have burned in red, black, white, and other pigments against the landscape. The weathered gray monuments seen today were once loud public images. They were not quiet gravestones at the edge of society. In a world without print, newspapers, or screens, they were closer to billboards, declarations placed directly in the path of the living. Some carried news from the farthest edges of the world their readers could imagine. Runic inscriptions remember journeys west to England, east along the river systems leading toward the lands of the Rus, south toward the Byzantine Empire, and outward across the North Atlantic. They almost never provide a complete narrative. Instead, they leave splinters of one, a destination, a companion, a title, a ship, a death beyond the horizon. Yet those fragments are enough to redraw the map. Scandinavia was not an isolated northern margin. It was part of a network of travel, trade, warfare, migration, and service stretching from the North Atlantic shores of North America to the Black Sea, with further connections beyond. At Jelling in Denmark, one stone transformed family memory into royal history. Around the year 965, King Harald Bluetooth raised the great monument in honor of his parents, Gorm and Thera. But Harald did more than mourn them. The inscription proclaims that he won Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian. In those few carved lines, runes became an instrument of dynasty, territory, religion, and political ambition, a royal version of history fixed in stone. The Jelling stone is often called Denmark's birth certificate. Yet even the most famous monument must be read with suspicion as well as admiration. Harald's inscription is the voice of a king, not the report of a neutral witness. Denmark did not appear in a single moment, and conversion did not move through every household at the same speed. Christian influence had reached Scandinavia before Harald's declaration, while older beliefs remained alive for generations afterward. The stone records a transformation, but also something more revealing: how a ruler wanted that transformation to be remembered. Here, one of the deepest modern assumptions about runes begins to collapse. Runes were not inherently pagan. During the conversion of Scandinavia, runic writing became closely entangled with Christianity. Crosses appeared beside serpents. Inscriptions asked God to help a soul. On one late 11th century Swedish stone, a woman named Una commemorated her son Östen and recorded that he died in his baptismal clothes. The same writing tradition that later Norse literature connected with Odin could also carry a Christian prayer. To the people carving those words, there was no contradiction. The alphabet belonged to whoever held the knife. Meanwhile, another alphabet was arriving from the south. It would gain immense authority, but it would not erase the runes quickly or completely. The Latin alphabet spread through the church, administration, manuscripts, and international correspondence. Yet the two systems lived beside each other for centuries. Across medieval Scandinavia, people continued cutting runes for prayers, ownership, affection, jokes, trade, and ordinary errands. Christianity did not simply extinguish runic writing. In some places, the growth of religious and administrative literacy may have encouraged writing more broadly, giving people more reasons to leave words behind. Most of that everyday writing has vanished. Nearly all of it, except where unusual conditions preserved the wooden voices of a city. At Bryggen in Bergen, archaeologists recovered hundreds of inscriptions on wood. Most belong to the centuries after the dates conventionally assigned to the Viking Age, so they cannot be projected backward without caution. Even so, they reveal what stone usually conceals: runes used in ordinary life by ordinary people for ordinary purposes. There are business records, names, prayers, verses, private messages, gossip, jokes, and the hesitant lines of learners. One celebrated inscription expresses affection and desire with a directness so immediate that the centuries seem to fall away. Bryggen changes the sound of the past. A rune was not always cut beneath a storm-dark sky during a solemn ceremony. Sometimes it was simply handwriting, a knife standing in for a pen, a sliver of wood standing in for paper. The North may once have been filled with such small written objects. Almost all of them dissolved before anyone thought to preserve them. But modern audiences usually arrive at the same question sooner or later. Were the runes magical? The honest answer is not yes. It is not no. It is that the boundary itself was different. Norse tradition gave the runes a sacred origin. In Havamal, a poem preserved in a 13th century manuscript, Odin describes gaining the runes through suffering, sacrifice, and revelation, hanging wounded, staring into the depths, until knowledge comes to him. Other medieval texts connect runes with protection, healing, danger, prophecy, and hidden knowledge. These sources are indispensable, but they must be handled carefully. They were written down after the Viking Age, long after the earliest inscriptions had been carved. They preserve traditions remembered and reshaped across time, not eyewitness resources of a single ancient ceremony. Archaeology nevertheless provides runic texts that appear ritual, protective, threatening, or deliberately obscure. Some objects carry divine names, repeated signs, enigmatic formulas, or curses against anyone who damages a monument. Because writing was still unusual, the act of inscription itself may have possessed an aura of force. A spoken warning vanished into the air. A carved warning remained in front of the body. A name, a prayer, or a threat could acquire a physical presence and continue acting long after the speaker had gone. Yet none of this proves that every individual rune carried one fixed spiritual meaning. Modern charts often assign each sign a universal lesson: wealth, journey, transformation, protection, destiny, and present the alphabet as a complete oracle. Historical evidence does not support such a simple system. Rune names are only partly reconstructed from later poems and manuscript traditions. Their associations changed across time and region. And in the overwhelming majority of Viking Age inscriptions, runes function as letters within words, not as isolated symbols arranged for fortune-telling. Nor is there solid evidence for the familiar modern ritual of drawing polished runestones from a small bag and interpreting them according to a standardized ancient method. Norse societies certainly sought omens and practiced forms of magic. The sagas describe prophecy, charms, dreams, and specialist ritual practitioners. But the commercial rune-casting system widely sold today is largely modern. It may carry genuine meaning for those who practice it now. It should not, however, be presented as a documented Viking Age procedure, because the surviving evidence does not show that it was one. The historical reality is more powerful precisely because it is less exotic. Runes did not need to be supernatural to alter the world. In a world where most words disappeared the moment they were spoken, a carved sentence broke the rule. It allowed the absent to speak. It held an oath in place. It kept the dead inside a family's conversation. And it gave a traveler a way to declare, across distance and time, I was here. Some travelers did exactly that, in places no Scandinavian carver could have imagined generations earlier. Inside Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, Norse visitors scratched names into marble. The best preserved inscriptions contain the names Halvdan and Are, though both texts are damaged. The carvers may have been members of the Varangian Guard or other Scandinavian travelers passing through the Byzantine capital. Their identities remain uncertain. The setting does not. Inside one of the greatest churches of the medieval world, surrounded by imperial ceremony, mosaics, incense, and Greek prayer, a northerner leaned close to the stone and cut his name into it. Farther west, Norse visitors entered the ancient monument of Maeshowe in Orkney and covered its interior with runic graffiti. Most of those inscriptions belong to the 12th century, beyond the period historians conventionally call the Viking Age. Yet they continue the runic tradition with irreverent energy. The carvers left names, boasts, remarks about treasure, and frank admiration for a woman. One praised his own skill. Another proudly drew attention to how high he had managed to place his inscription. These are not the remote voices of epic legend. They sound like people joking, competing, flirting, and showing off inside a monument already thousands of years old when they arrived. Even an ancient marble lion became a surface for Scandinavian memory. The Piraeus lion, carved long before the Viking Age and later carried from Greece to Venice, bears worn runic inscriptions left by Norse travelers. Much of the wording remains disputed, but the act itself is unmistakable. Northerners encountered a monument made by an older civilization, then inserted themselves into its surface. Runes moved because people moved. That movement reveals a society changing with extraordinary speed. Silver entered Scandinavia through long-distance exchange. Christian ideas traveled north. Royal models crossed borders. Stories returned with merchants, settlers, raiders, pilgrims, and mercenaries. Runic writing stood at the point where local identity met a world expanding around it. A northern script recording lives that were already international. It also preserves people almost absent from foreign chronicles. Writers outside Scandinavia usually noticed northerners when they attacked, negotiated, traded, or converted. Runestones allow Scandinavian families to name themselves in their own language and on their own terms. Women appear as commissioners, heirs, mothers, wives, landholders, and members of powerful kin groups. The inscriptions are brief, but even a few lines created by a community about itself can resist a stereotype created by its enemies. Then there are monuments that refuse to surrender their meaning at all. The greatest of these is the Rök Stone in Sweden, raised in the early 9th century. Its inscription contains roughly 760 runic characters, arranged through several kinds of cipher and unusual, disorienting reading patterns. It is the longest known runic inscription carved on stone. And yet, even when scholars can identify almost every sign, the text as a whole remains deeply contested. For generations, one influential interpretation connected part of the inscription with Theodoric the Great, ruler of the Ostrogoths. More recent research has challenged that reading. A newer and widely discussed interpretation instead connects the monument with a father's grief, mythic conflict, memories of an earlier environmental catastrophe, and fear that the sun itself might fail. That proposal has transformed the debate, but it has not ended it. Words, references, sequences, and even the intended route through the inscription continue to be argued over. The responsible conclusion is not that the Rök Stone has finally been solved. It is that the monument was created for an audience whose stories, rituals, expectations, and methods of reading are only partly recoverable. That is the humbling limit of runology. Deciphering letters is not the same as recovering meaning. A scholar may identify every sound and still miss the illusion. A word can be translated correctly, while the reason it was chosen remains unreachable. Each inscription stands between two absences, a damaged surface on one side and a vanished mental world on the other. Runology, therefore, is not a hunt for secret symbols. It is a discipline that brings linguistics, archaeology, history, art, religion, landscape study, and digital imaging into the same investigation. Researchers examine the angle of a stroke, the order in which lines were cut, the dialect hidden inside a spelling choice, the weathering across a surface, and the road or river beside which a stone once stood. New scanning technologies can reveal marks overlooked for generations. New excavations can move the history of writing further back than anyone expected. One uncertain line, a stroke newly found, or an old stroke newly understood, can change a name, a journey, or the meaning of an entire monument. The runes have also survived in places their makers could never have imagined. The Bluetooth symbol displayed on modern devices combines runic forms representing Harald Bluetooth's initials. The name was chosen for a technology designed to unite separate devices, echoing the historical image of a king associated with uniting separate lands. It is clever modern branding, not ancient prophecy. Yet it proves something important. Every age takes the runes and builds a new story around them. That habit carries a danger. Remove a rune from its inscription and it can be made to mean almost anything. Fantasy, spirituality, nationalism, fashion, marketing. Return it to the name of a mother, a traveler, a king, or a lost son, and it becomes specific again. The symbol regains its moment. The mark regains its speaker. History stops being decoration and becomes a human act. Perhaps that is the true secret language of the Vikings. Not a supernatural code for predicting what has not happened, but a technology designed to resist silence. Runes turned kinship into history, travel into evidence, belief into public declaration, and grief into something rain could not immediately erase. The carver from the beginning of this story is long gone. We will never hear his voice, see the concentration in his face, or know whether his hand hesitated before the final stroke. But the mark made by his tool crossed 1,000 years. It reaches us now not as a whisper from a magical alphabet, but as something more intimate, and perhaps more sweetness. A human being expected to be remembered. And somewhere, even now beneath a church wall, below a harbor street, inside a plowed field, or tangled among the roots of a Scandinavian forest, another message may be waiting. Not a prophecy, not a spell, just a handful of carved signs, still capable of forcing history to speak again.